Hi, my name is Bill Brewa, chef instructor at the Culinary Institute of America, and today we're going to make a number of different rice bowls. To begin with, we need to make some jasmine rice, which we'll use in each of the rice bowls. To start with, I'm going to take some of this U.S. jasmine rice, and for a measured amount of rice, I want to use 1 1/3 parts liquid. So for the 6 cups of rice that I have in the rice cooker, I'm going to use 8 cups of water. Now, in Asia, typically they cook their rice without salt, and I think that's a function of the food being so heavily spiced and seasoned. There's lots of soy sauce and stir fries available. If you prefer your rice with a little bit of salt, there's nothing to keep you from putting a tablespoon or 2 of salt into the rice cooker. That's all there is to it. About 45 minutes from now, this rice will be cooked. If you're convinced that putting more soy onto your menu would be a good thing, then let me help by introducing you to a rice bowl with spicy seared lemongrass tofu and Asian basil. This versatile and tasty crowd pleaser can easily be prepared as a vegetarian entree as well. Let's get started. To begin with, we need to make a marinade. Now, lemongrass can be very, very fibrous. That's why I'm using a mortar and pestle to do it. If you use a food processor, start by chopping the lemongrass up first and make sure you've got a really sharp blade. Anyhow, in goes the lemongrass. I've also got some ginger. And I'm going to take these 2 ingredients and just pound them to a paste, breaking down the fibers of the lemongrass and the ginger. Next, I'm going to take the sambal ulek, which is a chili paste, and add that to the mix. Also a little bit of soy sauce, turmeric, sugar, and a little pinch of salt. Now I'm going to carry on with the pounding until I've got basically a fairly dry paste. This is going to be the marinade that we use on tofu. The tofu I chose to use for this dish is a firm tofu. And I like to take it out of the package, drain off all the liquid it comes packaged in, and then press it and dry it before I actually use it. So the tofu I have here, I've pressed for about an hour between a couple of paper towels. Once you've pounded this dry marinade, I'm going to scrape it from the mortar and put it right over the top of the tofu. The tofu's been diced up about 3/4 of an inch on a side. Just toss the tofu in this marinade. Because this is firm tofu, it's a little bit tougher than some of the silken tofu out there, so you don't have to be too careful with it. It's fairly forgiving. And I would, if I had the luxury, marinate this the day before. Just set it in the refrigerator overnight. And that's exactly what I did yesterday. And what you see here is the tofu that's already been marinated. All right, once your tofu's marinated overnight, it's time to take it to the stove. I've got a nonstick pan on the heat, and I'm allowing it to get hot. Once the pan's hot, in goes a little bit of oil. And we're going to sear this tofu. Now, initially, you might want to handle it a little bit carefully so that you don't knock all of the marinade, the lemongrass, off the outside of the tofu. But as it cooks and it begins to form a crust, it becomes much, much easier to deal with. About 2/3 of the way through, we're going to introduce some garlic and some onions. And then the way that we finish this dish is by adding toasted peanuts and some Asian basil. As you can see, I've turned the tofu. It's browned beautifully, and it's browning now on the second side. Before it's completely cooked, I'm going to introduce some garlic and some onions and allow those to cook right along with the tofu. At this point, we're going to continue to cook the tofu and the onions until the onions begin to wilt just a little bit. I don't mind if they have a little bit of crunch to them. The way we're going to finish this dish is with chopped peanuts and Thai basil. Now, as you can see, the Thai basil is in whole leaves. Typically what I do is just take the leaves and tear them into large pieces before I add them to the pan. Because the basil is so aromatic, I think it's fairly important to add it just at the end of cooking, just before you're ready to serve this dish. Okay, I'm going to add some peanuts to this dish. And a big handful of Thai basil. Now it's time for us to put together the backbone of this rice bowl, which is, of course, the rice. What I'm using today is U.S. Jasmine rice, aromatic rice, and I've mixed in a little bit of U.S. basmati rice, but this basmati rice is brown rice. And I like to introduce it for the color and the texture and the nutty flavor. Now, don't cook these rices together. Brown rice has to be cooked separately because it requires a lot more water to cook. All right, I have a pan on the heat, and what I'm going to do is introduce just a little bit of oil, and we're going to saute some mushrooms to add to this rice. Now, in your recipe it calls for mushrooms, and I have some button mushrooms here. I also have a few wood ear mushrooms, which I think make a really wonderful statement. It provides a dark color and a really nice textural contrast. So, in goes the mushrooms. And I'm going to add the wood ear mushrooms at the same time. And we're going to start by sauteing those. As the mushrooms begin to take on a little blush of color, I'm going to add the garlic, also some shallots that I've minced, and I've got some Chinese long beans. Now these are fully cooked, and they just need to warm through. While they're cooking, I'm going to go ahead and season this with a little bit of salt and pepper. And finally, I'm going to introduce the rice to this pan and toss it all together. So let's see what this seared lemongrass tofu rice bowl actually looks like. To begin with, I'm going to put a nice, healthy portion of the rice into the bowl. Now, if you recall, this is the rice with sauteed mushrooms and with Chinese long beans. Once the rice is in the bowl, I want to make a little indentation in the middle to accept the tofu. Next, I'm going to stack this right in the middle. It's not a very soupy dish, so don't expect it to have a lot of sauce. If you'll recall earlier, we made the lemongrass vinaigrette, and we're going to take advantage of that vinaigrette when we put this dish in front of the customer. Next, I've got some microgreens. This is baby cilantro and a number of other greens. And I'm going to drizzle on just a little bit of the lemongrass vinaigrette. And we'll use this to garnish our rice bowl. And then there's a classical garnish that you will see used throughout Southeast Asia, and that is shallots that have been fried very, very slowly until they brown one, but also become very, very crispy. And once you've got them fried, you can hold on to these for 2 or 3 days without too much difficulty. Finally, I want to spoon on a little bit more of this vinaigrette. And I would suggest that you offer up a little bowl of the vinaigrette on the side so that people can add it to their own taste. There you are. Spicy seared lemongrass tofu rice bowl.